Hello, welcome back to another episode of Sparking Change, a podcast for prevention. Here I have with me Caleb from my committee, as well as Jody from the Alcohol Prevention Resource Center.
Hello.
Hi.
So, before we get started, we'd like to ask our guest on this podcast for today, Jody, what are some reasons that you really believe in advocating for substance use prevention? And part of our campaign as Catalyst is What's Your Why, which basically asks members of our community why they choose to stay substance free.
Wow, that's a really good way to start off. I really believe in this because I've been doing it for a long time and I know that it works. I've been in the field since 1991. So, like I said, a long time. And when I started in 91, we were probably at our highest rates of alcohol use in the country. And through prevention, it works. Those rates were really, really high all across the country. And we weren't doing evidence-based policy and strategies then. We were doing what felt good. Um, we were just trying to do things that didn't have a lot of science behind them. And we really learned our lesson. And now we're doing things that are science-based and evidence-based, and we've watched them in action. And my why is, wow, I've stuck with it because about 20 years ago in my home county, and I'm from Tazewell County, we lost 15 teens in 15 months due to car crashes. Half of those were substance use related. That was really hard. And my county is about 135,000 people. So to lose 15 teens in 15 months, and I knew some of those youth that passed away in car crashes. I had some of those youth in class. I worked for a health department at the time. That was really hard. So we had to put into action strategies and policies to to reduce underage drinking. And so that's how we created our coalition. And so it took a while, but from 2006 to 2014, we were able to reduce the 12th grade self-reported driving under the influence rate by 64%. So that's really my why. I'm extremely passionate about alcohol prevention and why I 100% believe in alcohol policy, alcohol prevention, and why you have to involve youth because that's what we did. You can't solve the problem without youth being the forefront. And that's what we did. And that's why I'm just so excited to be here with you all today.
That's amazing. Speaking of youth, we wanted to know that what are some of the ways that students have promoted alcohol prevention in the past, and how were some of these methods effective or maybe ineffective?
Okay, that's a great question, too. I think the most effective way you can use youth in your community is by involving them every step of the way. And that's what we did, and that's what I see really top coalitions all over the state of Illinois do. And what I mean by that is using them in a way that they are equal to every adult on that coalition. They need to be involved in assessing their communities. Um, so if you're doing environmental scanning, if you're doing key informant interviews, let them be the lead in sitting down with the police chief, letting youth be the ones who are promoting what the Illinois Youth Survey is and what the results of the Illinois Youth Survey are. Um, and then when you get those results back, being part of, gosh, these are what the results say. Let's look at what this means to our community and figure out what strategies and policies we need to put into place to reduce this use. And what I mean by that is we're really lucky in alcohol prevention because we've got decades of data and decades of science behind us. So if you have, say, social access is your issue. So you know from doing focus groups with your peers that they're saying, gosh, we're getting our alcohol from parties or our peers or our siblings. And then there's focus groups with adults saying, well, yeah, we've been providing alcohol to our teens. And then you're looking at your Illinois Youth Survey data, and on there it says, yep, we're accessing alcohol through a social access. So we're getting it from parties and from our parents. And then, so you want to put all that data together. So what should we do? You sit down together and you figure, oh, maybe we should put together a social host ordinance. Well, then youth can be the forefront of going to your city council and educating them on all the benefits of a social host ordinance. So that has been a really beneficial way of promoting alcohol prevention in the past, and it's been extremely effective to have youth lead every step of the way. But I think the most ineffective way youth and students are used is when adults use them as props for scare tactics, or just put them in at the very end and say, oh, by the way, we've decided this is what we're going to do. And here, you all just do this, and don't involve them from beginning to end. So we shouldn't be doing scare tactics. Um, and you should be, if this involves your whole world, so you should be involved from A to Z. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, we really appreciate that. I think that's definitely something that's really important, especially like when trying to involve youth and being really effective with it. We kind of wanted to transition into more of like the policy aspect of like, we know obviously you do some policy work as well, and how exactly does like the youth really connect with that? I know you did answer and touch on it a little bit about what the youth generally does, but specific to policy, is there any specific tactics that you use with your youth?
Yes. I think the one thing that you should start with is educating youth on how to, first off, to provide testimony at either city council, county boards, or in Springfield. I think that's incredibly important. Or if you are fortunate enough to go with your youth group to, say, CADCA, which is the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. They do a leadership forum in February where they take, some groups get to go with their youth and go to Capitol Hill Day. You need to understand, and adults do too, need to be trained on how to provide testimony. A lot of times you're only given like 3 minutes, so you need to give highlights on exactly what to say. So the really important thing is you have to educate, not lobby. So you can't say, I need you to vote yes or no on a certain bill, or yes or no on this ordinance. Because if you're sponsored by a grant, then if you have grant or foundational dollars that have an anti-lobbying clause, then you violated that. So that's a huge part of policy work that is like right up front, you can or can't do. So that's a really big piece of policy work. It's also really important to tell personal stories. So a lot of times especially with state level, with the General Assembly at the state level, they're hearing from big money every day. But what they're not hearing is the personal stories. And so that's where you need to be gathering your personal stories. And they have to be succinct. So they have to be, you know, short, 3 to 5 minutes, but they have to be very heartfelt. It's really important at the policy level. Yeah, you do that. Maybe you do that one day in Springfield, but start developing that relationship with the home base also. Every state representative and state senator, or US representative and US senator, has a home base. Start developing a relationship with the person that runs that office because they run everything. And so they're the ones that controls the calendar. They control what sits in front of the representative. So that's a really good thing also to um, to think about. The other thing is a picture speaks 1,000 words. So say you wanted to propose an ordinance about limiting alcohol outlet density. Because when it comes to the number of alcohol outlets in an area, that affects a lot. So limiting alcohol outlets in an area lowers, if you decrease alcohol outlets, you can decrease crime, violent crime, suicide rates, just a lot of different things. There's a lot of evidence behind that. One strategy and one policy. So, for that policy, if you would go out and do an environmental scan and look in your area to see how many alcohol outlets there are in your community, and then you would work with, say, you could go to your enforcement entity and pull up the data around violent crime, or find out from the health department if you look up they have data on suicide rates or any other rates that you want to look at, and then develop heat maps or work in it's a program called ArcGIS, and create a map. And that picture, along with your presentation, a picture speaks 1,000 words. So that's a really important part of policy as well, is creating a picture or creating an infographic. I know a big part of a campaign that the CDC has done this year is around excessive alcohol use. And the big number is 178,000 people die from excessive alcohol use each year. That's, I believe, if you're talking about opioid use, it's 107,000 people each year die from opioid use. Now, not to take anything away from that, but most people, when you would hold them on the street, they would flip those numbers. Most people don't even equate that alcohol use is higher than opioid use. So when you're working on policy, you want to get the latest data, the latest stats, and then create one pagers. You want to create a picture and then tell those personal stories and make sure it's you telling those stories.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking to hear that number. And I think it has been true that a lot of the times people just want to hear a genuine voice. So that feels good to be reassured of. And I did want to ask, transitioning more into local communities, um, how the APRC engages such local communities and high school students, and how maybe they can specifically get involved within these efforts, if there's any sort of um, campaigns that they can join into, or committees that they can join into, any of the sort.
I specifically work with the areas that I work with. I work with law enforcement, community coalitions, and municipal leaders. So what I typically do is, and the one thing that comes to mind is my work with the Illinois Liquor Control Commission's Division of Enforcement. And so one of the biggest assists that I think has created the biggest bang in Illinois and how youth can continue to help and move things forward is, and it goes along with taking pictures and making sure their voices are heard, is with co-branded alcohol beverage placement. About 2 years ago, that market started to explode in Illinois. And that is when I talk about co-branded alcohol beverages, I'm talking about, you've probably seen like there's regular Mountain Dew and then there's hard Mountain Dew. There's simply lemonade and there's simply spiked lemonade. So it's the Alco Pops, it's whatever you want to term it. Different people term them different things, but in the law, they're called co-branded alcoholic beverages. So a couple years ago, we tried, there was a bill that went out, and on our end, what we needed were pictures. So prior to that bill even being created, the Division of Enforcement was like, we know these things are a problem. However, there's no evidence that there's a problem out there. So can you ask your coalitions and the youth coalitions that you work with to start doing some, and it's an environmental scan, to start doing environmental scanning of grocery stores and gas stations and convenience stores to see if things that are co-branded are being misplaced in stores. So if you're seeing regular Mountain Dew and hard Mountain Dew next to each other, can they take a picture and send that, email it over to the Division of Enforcement at the Illinois Liquor Control Commission? And what that did was they got inundated with those pictures, and a bill was able to be written by their legal division. Now, the bill did not pass, but what happened was an emergency rule was then able to be written. So that emergency rule went into effect that those things could no longer be placed on the shelf next to each other. That an emergency rule then became a permanent rule. Well, because that happened, legislation last spring went into effect, and then a public act just passed and will become law January 1st that now says not only cannot co-branded alcoholic beverages be set side by side, so they can't be placed on a shelf next to each other, and it can't be placed next to other soft drinks, fruit juices, bottled water, candy, snack foods portraying cartoons or youth-oriented images. So, you can't have hard Mountain Dew next to something like Cheetos because it's got a cartoon character on it. But it also can't be placed next to Hot Wheels. And I say that because it's that way in a store. But it also put in there alcohol infused products. So like the whipped creams and ice creams now that have alcohol in it. All of that was put into a bill that's now law that will take effect January 1. That all came about because youth took pictures. So it's things like that that youth need to continue being the eyes and ears for adults because we're not necessarily out and about like that. So if you're out there, it's the whole see something, say something. There's emails out there. So continue to monitor things, to say things. There's also opportunities to be trained to be underage buyers for alcohol compliance checks. Law enforcement is always looking to partner with youth. So that's another opportunity. Now, typically you need to be 18 or 19 to do that, but there's many opportunities out there for youth to get involved in alcohol prevention, alcohol policy. It's all about remaining connected to your coalition. I'm always open. You can always email me. I can help find you locations within Illinois, within law enforcement. That's part of being what a resource center does.
Thank you so much. I think that's really helpful, especially with some of like these actionable tips for a lot of people to be taking. And we just have another question, and basically we're just wondering how you were able to target your messaging to these different audiences. I know obviously as a coalition, prevention is important not just in youth, but in adults as well. So how are you able to effectively reach these audiences and really make meaning to them through the different types of campaigns or whatever types of projects you have that you do with the community?
I'm able to work with lots of different subject matter experts. I've worked for a really long time with law enforcement, so I have lots of law enforcement peers that I work with to glean their expertise. So any of the resources that I need from them, I'm able to work with them to put together resources for law enforcement, community coalitions. When I worked in my home county, I was our county chair or our coalition chair for 7 years. I've been through the National Coalition Academy, so I understand how coalitions work. So that piece, I've got a pretty good handle on. I still work with coalitions. Um, and then the municipal piece, we actually go to them. So we exhibit at the Illinois Municipal League Conference. We exhibit at the Township Officials of Illinois Conference. We do a lot of one-on-one. We have an advisory council. We just do a lot of open-minded discussions, and we try to use a lot of different experts in the field and remain open. Just like if we were developing something for youth, we would want everything and use all the youth expertise that we could get. You can't do something for someone without someone.
Thank you. That really helped us understand some of the ways that you do this effectively. I think that is about it in terms of the questions we had for you. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
Just that I really appreciate your time. And know that, the most effective way and the most effective legislative policies that we have been raising that minimum legal drinking age to 21. I know sometimes in Illinois, we have people that still try to lower the minimum legal drinking age. So, it has the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, they estimated between 1975 and 2017, it prevented 31,959 estimated lives saved because of raising that minimum legal drinking age. So that's huge for policy. So that's a big policy win. And the other thing is taxes. A lot of times people don't want to think about our taxes being increased. But alcohol taxes would be such a huge win for Illinois. They haven't been increased for a very, very long time. And that is the number one way to decrease consumption. And there's fewer motor vehicle crashes and fatalities. There's less alcohol impaired driving. There's less death from liver cirrhosis. There's less death overall. And it's very little cost per drink, if you want to look at it that way. Currently in Illinois, it's 2 cents per beer that's taxed. So if we were ever to do anything to decrease use, that would be, a really good use of our time. But so that's just what I would like to end on. We do have a couple webinars coming up in January. One happens to be on, you know, taxes. So on January 9th.
Thank you so much. If there's any other social medias or website information that you'd like to share with the listeners, you can feel free and let them know right now, or I can also put it in the description as well. Okay, thank you. So that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and make sure to follow us on Instagram for more updates at catalyst_SHS or by clicking the link in our description. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.